You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant. In today's episode, we're going to dive into retail media. I think a lot of people have been talking about this recently. It's been, probably grabbing about 30% of my conversation time with the brands that I'm talking to. And so it's a pretty big number. If it's 20 to 30 brands a week, we're looking at 6 to 9 brands there that are talking about it. So very topical right now. And that's across the board from startup to Fortune 100. Everybody's thinking about it. And so got a great friend of the network. We've been in the same, the same ecosystem for a while now, but we actually just got connected like a couple months back and had a few great conversations. So Andrew, thanks so much. Welcome to the podcast. I'll kind of kick it over to you if you want to do a brief intro on yourself in your organization. That would be great. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Aaron. So I'm Andrew Lipsman. I'm a principal analyst covering retail and e-commerce at Insider Intelligence. My career has really been spent watching the evolution of all things digital. So I've spent quite a bit of time in digital advertising, and the fact that digital advertising and e-commerce and retail are intersecting in the form of retail media has been a sweet spot. So you said 30% of your conversations are around retail media. At this point, my conversations, I would say, are 70 to 80% about retail media. So I spent a lot of time, done a lot of research, and there's just so much exciting stuff that's happening. We're already a really big market, and it's only getting better. So I'm really excited to talk about that today.
Yeah. So I just want to start at the basic level, because where we're at right now is nobody knows where to start. Right? Or we knew where to start, which was Amazon. So maybe that's wrong. People don't know what steps 3, 4, 5, and 6 are. And it's because, dollars getting pulled in every direction. Every retailer out there has come out with their own ad network, and everybody's demanding it. But whether the systems aren't quite ready to handle either the feedback, the data they need, they're at the spot where they just need to learn. That's why I was excited about this episode as a whole. So and I know you've done a bunch of stuff with around retail media as a whole. You want to just break it down? Are there like a few core tenets that you see happening?
Yeah, well, as you noted, the early days of retail media, and by the way, we're going to be a $45 billion industry here in the US, but Amazon's about 3/4 of that, right? And search is the lion's share of Amazon. So Amazon search is what got us here. That's the easy money to kind of pump into retail media in the beginning. But there's so much more happening. So where it goes forward is really interesting. And then, as you noted, everyone's an ad network these days. So every retailer has flooded into this space. And there's a lot of interesting players beyond Amazon. And we're starting to see that materialize, I think, in this year in particular, in really new and exciting ways. So that's kind of the moment where we're at. And what I think about a lot is how do brands make sense of this space? What actions do they need to take in the current environment? How should they think about platforms outside of Amazon? And then how do they place bets on the future? Because the future is really exciting. I've called retail media digital advertising's third big wave, the first being search, the second being social, and now retail media. And I'm increasingly convinced it's destined to be the biggest. I don't think that's hyperbole. And I've been making this argument that search got us here. Search has a lot of legs left. There's a lot of value to be tapped across these other networks, but the next 3 pillars of growth are also every bit as exciting, and there's a ton of value that's going to be realized. So if I'm a retailer, I'm figuring out what do I need to do to serve brands, and if I'm a brand, I'm thinking about how do I need to think about retail media so I can take full advantage of what's increasingly becoming a full funnel advertising and marketing apparatus.
Yeah. Who's number 2? A couple questions that I get a lot. Where do I go second? Do I go Target? Do I go Walmart? Who's number 2?
Yeah, Walmart right now is a pretty clear number 2, with about 7, I think going on 8% market share of retail media. So that's how big a gap there is between Amazon and number 2. Instacart's another key player, Target. So there's a number of key players. I think the biggest ones obviously play across multiple categories. So grocery is always going to be kind of at the center of it. But Amazon and Walmart and Target are obviously multi-category retailers. But then you have some really strong specialty retailers in this space. So if you're a category leader like Home Depot or Best Buy, you're also in a really good position.
Yeah. How do people look at budgets? And then I also want to break down, you said there are kind of like three pillars there. I'd like to dive into those, but just to tackle a couple questions I get a lot is, how do I divide up my budget? How should I be thinking about Walmart? As the number two? Yeah, because you're right. I mean, it's different if you're a specialty like Home Depot, right? They've got a pretty good system worked out there. But these multi-category retailers, and then you're a brand selling in them, Amazon have to be there. How should they think about dividing up the budget?
Yeah, where do those next dollars go? So first off, I mean, just really quickly, where do the dollars come from? I mean, we had a lot of incremental spend in 2020 and 2021, just flooding into digital, disproportionately went into Amazon and retail media. But those incremental dollars aren't as strong these days as the market rationalizes. So it's going to come from national media dollars, maybe Facebook budgets that are looking for somewhere else to go, shopper and trade marketing. So it's coming from everywhere. So there's a lot of these budget conversations that are going on at the brands. As far as where do those next dollars get spent, it's which platforms are going to perform. And I think about getting in early. There's usually in digital advertising arbitrage opportunities. So Amazon has gotten very competitive, right? There's a high ad load, and it's still a very performant medium, but it's more competitive. Walmart is a great example of how they've innovated over the past year. So Seth Dallaire came in, right? He was early Amazon, then stood up the Instacart retail media network, and now he's leading efforts at Walmart Connect. And one thing he knows is the importance of a second price auction. And so Walmart wasn't there yet. And under his leadership, they instituted that second price auction. And what happened was that almost immediately the cost per click on Walmart went down. And that's not great for Walmart in the short term, but it's really good for them in the long term, because what happened is that return on ad spend shot up like a rocket. It surged. It was behind Amazon and Instacart, and it surged ahead of them. So now there's much higher ROAS on Walmart as a result of that. And guess what? Brands are really happy from what I'm hearing from those on the ground, where they're saying, I'm now I can invest confidently in Walmart Connect.
Yeah. I mean, the first price auction, just, to clarify for people listening, that's where if I bid $1 and you bid $2, you win for $2, as opposed to second price, which if I bid $1, you bid $2, you win for $1.01. And so I had a lot of brands when, it first launched on Walmart, and they would go in and they would bid high to make sure they won, and they'd blow through an entire ad budget and get next to no sales. And
they're bidding against themselves.
$5, $10.
Yeah.
Just to make sure they won it. They just blew through it. And
it doesn't work great in CPG, right? The thinnest margin business. You don't have a lot of extra dollars to work with.
People were mad. And we were talking to even some of the top agencies in the space, and I was asking them sometimes, like, hey, can you jump on? Can you just do a webinar with us and just explain what's going on? They're like, no way. I'm not talking about this. We're looking back, a few years now. They're like, no, we're not doing it. But yeah, the second price auction, it pretty much, I think, was a huge game changer. The other thing, right, was it used to be, if you were below certain search ranking, you couldn't even do paid media. So anytime you launched a new product, you couldn't even put ad dollars behind it.
Yeah, they leveled the playing field for marketplace sellers. They improved search ad relevance. So all of these things together have really just it clicked, and the numbers are taking off, and it's working for brands. So one of the things I would say, every other retailer is trying to figure things out, right? Walmart's the number 2 player. And in some ways, they just figured out some of these things within the last year or so. So that's encouraging for the whole ecosystem. It just tells you, once you work your way down the list to the top 10 and beyond the top 10 in retail media, they can make some tweaks to their system and really serve brands well. And there's value to unlock there.
What's the difficulty in getting there? I mean, Amazon has the playbook, right? It's already there. You can just follow the playbook.
To some extent, if it were that easy, right? Amazon has developed the ad units, and I think a lot of retail media networks understand you don't try and reinvent the wheel. So follow what Amazon is doing in terms of the customer experience. But there's a lot under the hood. So Amazon has done really well because their search ad relevance is really best in class. A lot of retail media networks are not there yet, so they need to improve their search ad relevance. They need to be easy to use. Don't be too complicated. Make it easy for brands to invest. Make sure that they aren't bidding against themselves. So I just think it's a natural progression. Why haven't we gotten there sooner? This isn't a core competency for retailers. And to some extent, and I give retailers a lot of credit for this, they are first and foremost about customer experience. So when you introduce advertising into the equation, right, there can be a tension with customer experience. And I think that they have smartly sort of treaded lightly and not trying to pummel users with ads or make it a bad experience and turn them away. So they'll have to continue to navigate that tension. But that's why they're not there yet. But again, it's upside.
Yeah, we just did a survey with a bunch of people in the network around paid media on Amazon, as long as we're in this retail media space. I have a lot of brands that are dialing it back. And a lot of the reasoning is they don't want to go out of stock with all this stuff that's going on with the inventory, the FCs, them reducing space. And that has a lot of people on top of that. They got over-indexed during the pandemic, right, on Amazon as a whole. And so I just have a bunch of brands that are trying to dial back the paid media. I shouldn't say dial it back. They don't want to grow at the same rate they were growing their paid media on Amazon. And if you're in the right categories, you have confidence in Walmart Connect. I get that question a lot. Where else do I go? So you feel good about Walmart Connect?
I think there's been a ton of progress and
Awesome.
there's data to prove it. I mean, to those ROAS figures that I mentioned, just to give you a sense of it, this is according to PackView data, which is great data. Amazon and Instacart consistently are in that kind of $4.50 to $5 ROAS range pretty consistently. Walmart was at about $3.50, and just started surging ahead, drew even in Q2 of last year with Amazon and Instacart, and then surged ahead to where it's now most recently over $6.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is the arbitrage opportunity. What's going to happen? Everyone's going to realize this sooner or later. They're going to flood in. It's going to get more competitive, and that will ultimately kind of bring that ROAS down into an equilibrium. But like, now's the time, and things like this are happening on other networks too, where there's really strong ROAS to be had. And listen, it's always going to vary by product and category and things of that nature. So this isn't like a be all end all. You still have to be smart about it, but that's the opportunity that gives right now scale and all else equal, a pretty strong return on ad spend.
It's going to be super interesting to follow, we'll say, the big CPGs, the big companies who kind of punted on Amazon, right, early on in retail media. And you saw all these crazy brands just jump in and skyrocket to the top of search and just build. And, to see if they've learned a lesson or not. And this is, I would say, just the CPGs, everybody, right? Did you learn that lesson that the early adopters, you're trying it out, there's a lot of momentum and big returns to be had if you're going to jump in and try it out, or you can wait until they have it, more mature, and then you're playing catch up.
They learned by getting burned on Amazon, right? So then they flooded in. So the big multinational CPGs came in with a force and fury in 2020 and 2021. Have they learned that lesson? Now it's time to move to the next networks. And listen, I don't want to undersell it. Like, these brands are already spending across a lot of networks. And the bigger issue that I'm hearing today is I don't know how to do it across so many. I need help once I get past 3 or 4 networks. And then also, like, what's the most efficient way to allocate that ad spend? If they're cross comparing something like return on ad spend, it's often said that it's a blunt metric. Actually, I credit Carrie Masters for that. It's good. It's nice shorthand. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's not as sophisticated and will not tell you the whole story.
Yeah, no, and I've had that conversation with Carrie. But what is it good for? We have a lot of executives that, they're leading the company, right? They need simple to understand metrics, and ROAS is the simplest of all. right? And so that's what they're looking for, to go in and try to dissect it. And, the other thing is there aren't the right tools, right? The multi-touch attribution tools that everybody wants, they're not there. So ROAS becomes a really simple thing that I know a lot of executives are just asking for. Now, it's not the right metric, but
Yeah.
it's something that can be easily communicated. And, you can then have a really easy target. Right? I tell
Yeah.
people, I can get you whatever ROAS you want. If you just let me bid on whatever search terms I want, you want to
Yeah.
hire ROAS, I'll bid on your name. It's
Exactly.
like, okay.
You can narrow cast and get a really high ROAS and influence almost no dollars. Yeah, I mean, ROAS, that's the CFO metric, right? What you can present up to the CFO, and it seems to make sense. But the CMO metric is really incremental ROAS. How do I understand what I'm getting that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten from people's actual spending behavior?
Right. I also see a lot of these retail media networks. There's slowly a shift that viewing it, they are ad networks, but these platforms as also just advertising, right? It is brand awareness, right? You
Yes.
have to be there. And so you are. And then you can't not be there at the same time. And so it's
Right.
almost brand awareness where I see a lot of people almost pulling that lever as well, because you don't know where people are going to end up now. And I think that's going to get increasingly difficult as, more and more people go shop on Walmart or Target because the experience has gotten better.
Yeah, brands need to move up the funnel. You don't want to lose share of voice with competitive brands. So you got to be there and be in the conversation, independent of somebody searching and clicking specifically. And that's one of the three key levers that I see as driving the future of retail media. The first one is moving up the funnel. So it's up the funnel with on-site media. So that's display and video impressions on site. But increasingly, it's using DSPs to deliver those ads on the open web or even social platforms offsite. And then kind of the big piece of it that I'm really excited about is streaming TV. I mean, CPG marketers are used to being TV advertisers, but guess what? Now you can target the right audiences and measure attribution after the fact in that environment. I mean, right? That's like the holy grail for
Yeah.
marketers. So we're right at that point where we're starting to get scale of advertising inventory to be able to do this. And I think it's going to totally disrupt TV advertising. So that's the first one. The other two, which we can unpack, are the impact of offline attribution data. So we've basically been computing ROAS based on an online ad driving an online sale. But those online ads, especially when you move up the funnel, drive in-store sales. And a lot of the data architecture isn't there to be able to pull that information in or pull it in quickly enough to optimize around. And, that's the other 85% of retail sales. And in a category like food and beverage, it's closer to 95%. So what happens to ROAS when you start accounting for those dollars? And then the last of the three pillars is the rise of in-store retail media, which I'm really excited about it, as you have digital surfaces entering into the store environment that become great quality branding experiences and can drive sales in store.
Yeah, so I want to unpack that a little bit, just going back to, my days on the brand side where you'd have end caps, displays, is that what you're talking about, but just a more digital version of them?
Absolutely. I mean, so there's so many digital surfaces in the store and potential for digital surfaces. So just to give an example, there's on the cooler aisle, right? You have cooler screens and digitized surfaces that show planograms and then actual ads for brands in store. You have digital end caps. I mean, literally, a company like Perch is at the end cap aisle where you can have digital displays and interaction with the brands. So there's also kind of performance advertising built into it. You've got grocery TV, which has screens at checkout or front of store. So there's all these different areas and surfaces that I think it works. Like, I think it's important that the advertising start with being a really good, high quality experience. But this is a commercial setting, especially a grocery store, where I think people are okay with it as long as you don't overdo it. And you can create really good quality experiences that serve as those reminders of the brand and really increase awareness, introduce new products, give them relevant information for the shopping trip.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at, all this where you just shop as you go and you're using your phone. I mean, instead of those, the coupon, you're walking down the aisle, it kicks out the coupon that you grab, then you put it in your pocket and you're going to use it and you forget until you get in the car. If you're shopping in real time on your phone, just have it give you a QR code to scan, right? Scan the QR code automatically. I mean, you think from a brand standpoint, I mean, that was part of, the podcast a few back with Tim Armstrong over at Flowcode, which was, if you can start viewing those opportunities as first party data collection, attribution data, like you can start really connecting some dots, which then gets back to your second point, right? Which is attribution, which is what everybody wants to get to. How do you tie all these different things together? And
that's the power of retail media. It's all about the closed loop, right? I mean, that's the bottom line, is you have this great first party data to target and then measure performance after the fact. It works the best with fast moving consumer goods because you just have that depth and richness of data across so many different brands. And now you just think about that closed loop apparatus and you can apply it to any context. It's not just search, it's up the funnel into display and video and streaming TV. It's amazing the power that's going to be unleashed. But, in store is another one of those formats. Now, what I would say there is we have to be a little bit careful because personalization and targeting and first party data doesn't and maybe shouldn't work as well there. I think of it as a mass media vehicle. You have huge audiences in store. Think of it as a brand advertising vehicle that can help plug the gap that's being left by the decline of linear TV, where these CPG brands have historically advertised. Use it to put your brand in front of those consumers in a brand safe and contextually relevant environment. And then consumers do like deals, so they will plug into the opportunity through interaction with screens, as you said, QR codes, or plugging into their loyalty program. So there's ways that they can do that as well. And then you also kind of get that data experience that can be more personalized for consumers who want to opt into that.
Yeah, but if you can get device ID, if you can connect it all, then you're getting back to the streaming TV, right? Which is, I think, a huge area, right? Because everybody does talk about cutting the cord, but if you think about that, hey, the old Super Bowl ad, thing where, hey, I'm going to do one commercial and it's going to hit 10 million people. Well, is that worth the millions of dollars you spend on it? But in this case, you can actually then pick, right?
So what can that look like?
Target it. You can do the demographic. You can do whoever. You can get your own cohort built within the Amazon platform, the Walmart platform.
Those people,
very specific.
Those people who respond to offers, say in store, right? So now they've opted in. You get that first party data. You have a segment of consumers, right, tied to an ID. Now you can create lookalikes around that. And then you can activate that data in these other environments. You want to go and deliver scaled campaigns in a TV-like environment, right? That relatively small sample that you might get of people who actually respond in store. And let's say they respond to an offer, they're Coke buyers, now they buy Pepsi. Now you can keep delivering messaging to them through TV-based or similar types of audiences through that streaming TV environment, right? It's really profound how this is going to be able to change the landscape. I mean, retargeting through TV based on physical store behavior. I mean, think about that for a second.
Well, and it used to be, if that was the case, they went back to the store they got it from. But now it's a game changer for the brand, right? Which is, I now get to pick where I want to send them. If I'm going to put, again, going back to the QR codes because they're easiest, nobody wants to type in a URL anymore. You can direct them wherever you want them to go. And then you can also do analysis on that cohort, that segmentation you put up, who clicked and went here and actually bought, who clicked and went here and actually bought. And you can keep fine tuning, but then you can redirect them even to your own direct consumer site. You don't have to rely on them to go back to the store, right? Have them scan it and ship it right away with a discount.
All of the above, right? Now, so I mean, it's truly omni-channel, which has almost become a cliche, but the consumer is going to engage across all these channels, and you can use those engagements to then reach them across the full funnel, and then they can make those purchases across different channels.
What happens to all the data? Right. I mean, I think that one of the biggest things is how do people crunch all the data, I guess, at the end of the day, because people now, they don't have data lakes anymore, right? They have like data oceans, and they're trying to manage those and crunch it and get the right insights out. And the people who figure that out are going to just go crush it, right? Before anybody else does, if you can crunch the data.
Yeah, that's where machine learning comes in, because it has the horsepower to make some of those optimizations. And I always, right, it's like there's so much data, and data can get you very efficient. But as you just noted with ROAS, right, I can narrow cast and get high return on ad spend, but it's not actually moving dollars. So you're always going to have to balance that tension between performance per impression and scale. I need to have enough impressions that are actually going to work and reach big enough audiences. So listen, I think marketers can do this in an analog way and get a lot of return from it. But can AI and machine learning probably do a better job of optimizing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the answer is yes. I mean, I there needs to be somebody there like monitoring it, right? I always like take the analogy, like the self-driving car is fantastic until somebody spray paints the 3 on a 35-mile-per-hour curve going around a curve sign, and they spray paint that 3 into an 8, and it reads it as 85, and you accelerate over. You need to have some checks and balances in there.
Yes, you need the humans have to set the algorithms. The algorithms on their own worry me. The black box worries me on what happens. So yes, you always need to balance it with that sense of reality.
But when you mentioned the black box, it is something that's interesting that I think tech has come far enough along now, where a lot of what people thought were like smoke and mirrors before, which probably were the mechanical Turk that's out there, that you think it's giving you, it's actually crunching all the data, but it's really just outsourcing it to a bunch of people who are actually doing it themselves. We're at a point now where I think AI and machine learning are actually going to allow us to make some really cool decisions. They're going to change the way people interact with these platforms that have gotten so complicated.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think we have, the conversation has obviously shifted since ChatGPT, but I just think of machine learning. Well, actually, I would say I always push back on AI. I said, it's really, think of it more as machine learning. And it's just like raw horsepower to run through in a confined set of parameters, how to optimize to the best possible outcome. But what you miss is the stuff that's outside of those parameters. But I would say optimize that way, but just make sure that you're building in the checks and balances along the way. But I think we're so low on sort of the optimization curve that I don't think you even need to jump into that to get a lot more value. I think it's just about using the data that you have and just getting smarter and keep taking these incremental steps to start reaping significant benefits.
Are there like common mistakes that you see people do with retail media as they think about it or they execute it?
I think, well,
I'll jump in with mine, not experimenting, not experimenting. And that's like the number one in my book, but I'm a scientist by training, right? Like I live to experiment. And so that's one, but then I don't know, on the executional side or the budgeting side, like, is there a difference between winners and losers that you see, or winners?
I look at it two ways. So I come from the world of data. I think we need to be data driven, but there's also a lot that data doesn't tell us. So knowing what data is not going to tell you. I did a report last year about the digital shelf for CPG brands. And one of the best insights that came out of it is that so much of that value in what performs, what works, what consumers respond to on the digital shelf is the image and the quality of the image and, nuanced aspects of it, like contrast of the imagery, the colors, just the way that the product is positioned, the shadow. I mean, just like stuff that you can't measure very easily. Actually, one of the companies I talked to was Visit. So they are starting to measure this stuff, but it's the hard to measure stuff that we easily look past. And like, think about yourself. I don't know. When I go and try and pick out a new beer in the beer aisle, I start by what kind of beers do I like? Okay. Now I pick by the can. Like that can's pretty cool.
You haven't tasted it before. You are, right? It's a complete gamble.
That can's really cool. I like how colorful it is. So consumers do respond to this stuff and is not necessarily easy to measure. I think we've become too data driven in some respects, and we've lost some of the sensibility of what really works, like the hallmarks of traditional marketing. So, right, some of that is creative and branding. Some of that is just thinking about scaled media and not thinking that you have to jump to over optimizing at everything, which is why when I talk about in-store media, I say, let's not start with personalization. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, we can just like collect data from people and like target them with ads as they're walking past us in the aisle. I'm like, no, don't do that. If they opt in, it's okay, but
Like
don't
not
do
as
that.
creepy, right?
It's good. Yeah, it gets
Yeah.
creepy. People
Thanks
don't want
for
that.
buying Cheerios the last 3 times. Right.
Right.
I'm buying
So
Cheerios.
so I think there is a tendency to over optimize or get too deep into the personalization. And I'd say like we don't need to go there all the time. Like let's pull it back a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. The over personalization. Oh, what is it? The old, I always laugh, and I brought this up before, the old Tom Cruise movie,
Minority
right? Where
Report.
was that? Yeah. He's like
Yeah.
walking down, like everybody's like, we're there. We're literally there.
You're
People
you're
laughed
you're
at the
reading my
time.
mind. I'm writing a report on in-store media right now, and I actually use that turn of a phrase where I say like marketers love this idea of Minority Report. Most shoppers do not.
No, right.
It's dystopian.
So true. Like, where do people get like the research that you're doing, the reports that you keep mentioning?
Yeah, for subscribers on Insider Intelligence, they can get full access to these. But we have a lot of newsletters as well. So there's plenty of content that gets splintered off of those reports, or that we just write standalone articles. So there's plenty of out there that is outside of our paywall as
Yeah,
well.
you just said digital shelf, which was huge. And you also brought up the team at Visit, which we've had on. And one of them, I love what you're kind of bringing up, because, they're analyzing, hey, even from marketplace to marketplace, Amazon to Walmart to Target, the positioning, are there 2 cans outside of the 12 pack? Are there 2 cans inside? Is it, rotated 30 degrees, 35, 40 degrees? All of those make an impact on the shopper, and it's different. The Target shopper is not the Walmart shopper, is not the Amazon shopper. And how those people shop on the platforms are all different. And so the content you put on them, right, needs to be directed at them, or you could be losing. All this stuff got more complicated over the past 2 years. That's what's crazy.
Yeah, and some of it is product attributes and setting the right expectations with the customer, but some of it is the most simple branding. I mean, one of the examples I talked about in the digital shelf report was Buy. And they were one of the early brands that kind of shot up the leaderboards on Amazon. I talked to John Denny, who was there in the early days of the Buy brand, and he was like, it was branding. I mean, everything was so specific in terms of the contours of the bottle, the clean white label, the simple text that just said BAI, and then the color pop of fruit, and the way it literally jumped out. And when you have that kind of small thumbnail image, right, that breaks through in a way that if you just import the way other brands are being shown, it doesn't work as well. So, I mean, those insights I think are just incredible, because you would think, oh, these guys were the most amazing, data optimizers on Amazon. And they were. I don't want to sell that short. I think they were good at the whole craft, but the branding was what John said was like key.
Yeah. And, again, getting back to the larger companies, they got to the game a little bit late. They took Amazon seriously a little bit later than a lot of us wanted. And, when we're sitting inside big companies trying to get Amazon up and going, and then you're struggling to get images and content and everything else, when you see the teams like Buy just go destroy it, you're like, son of a gun.
Yeah. And you got to ask yourself, what are they doing? What did they know that I don't know? And I'll guarantee that those early conversations had nothing to do with how clean and pristine the branding around the image was.
Right. So, what what are you excited about coming down the pipe here? What gets you? And the other thing is, like, what questions do you have for me? I've picked your brain for a while here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited about all of it. I mentioned those 3 growth levers. I mean, it's like asking me to choose between my children, which is my favorite, because I think the second I start talking about any one of them, they get really exciting. And then I'm like, recently, I've kind of started to go deep again on search. I'm like, wait a second, there's so much in search. There's so much gold in our own backyard. Let's keep digging there. So it all excites me. But I would say for me, I want to know from you what you're hearing from brands. You talk to so many of them. I hear attention. There's both a lot of excitement They are very interested in where retail media is going, and yet you do hear a lot of grumbling about how difficult it's gotten because there's so many players. So what are you hearing from brands that are kind of the positives and negatives of retail media and what they're trying to figure out?
Yeah, if we tackle like the positive is there's alternatives to Amazon, right? And across the board, most people don't enjoy their Amazon relationship, right? They enjoy Amazon and selling on Amazon and the ad and how like advanced it is. It's a great interaction, but they really enjoy the interaction they get on selling on Amazon, and the profit margins aren't always fantastic. And that was, based on when they came to jump on to Amazon a little bit later, they just uploaded, current wholesale pricing. And so they always struggle a little bit. A lot of people struggle with, overall profitability, but they wave it off because there's so much marketing that's going on there. So they're excited that Walmart is turning the corner. Target is turning the corner. They're overwhelmed though by the fact that, Ahold, Lidl, Piggly Wiggly all want to have their retail media networks, and everybody's asking for money now. Which you were kind of helping address, like, where does the money come from is the first one, right? Where does it come from and how do I spend it? And we've got all these extra Amazon dollars that should go to Amazon, but we're dialing it back because we don't necessarily want to pour more into the network, and we have all these other asks. So the most difficult thing is, like, this isn't something that somebody's been doing for 6, 7, 8 years, right? We're in test and learn phase. And the difficult thing right now is, like, as things start to slow down, like, budgets get dialed back, testing and learning gets dialed back. And so I'm a big advocate for, and this comes up a bunch on the podcast, which is having a research budget, an R&D budget associated with digital commerce. Where it lies, it doesn't matter. Marketing, digital sales team, CMO, CDO, who cares? But this untouchable chunk of cash that allows you to go have the freedom to investigate new ad tech, new platforms, new retail media outlets, try Amazon Live, like whatever it might be. But that's not there. It's not there for a lot of companies. I say it's there for just startups right now because that's inherently where they live. But, I'm running, a large CPG company, a digital organization. The number one thing I'm going for is that, and then to give the freedom for people to try it. But I think the frustration is, like, they're being asked to execute in a game that's only been around for really a few years. So there's no real mentors out there. There are some people who happen to just by happenstance get it right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a mentor or that they're willing to teach others or that they want to teach others or that they can teach others. And so we're just
they're being asked to optimize within the current constraints, which is Amazon search primarily. And you have to think a little bit longer term. I understand it's easy for me to say because I don't have to hit those quarterly sales goals.
Right.
But I mean, the reality is that relatively small research budget and investing in testing and learning in different formats and different networks is going to pay such big dividends because you're going to find the arbitrage opportunities. And there are going to be dozens of great arbitrage opportunities, right? That Walmart one that we said, like, that's a big opportunity right now that has both performance and scale. It may not be there forever as more brands, get wise to it. So what's the next one? You got to be ahead of the curve. And that's what's exciting is there's more networks to work your way down the list, and there are more formats to start experimenting with. And then for me, longer term, how do these things work together? That's where a lot of value is in terms of branding and performance, is that 1 + 1 = 3. So you figure out the optimal mix of how you allocate those budgets, you hit another level of performance.
Yeah.
Tons of value out there to be tapped. Like, it's a fun time, but yes, you need to go in with a little bit of a war chest to experiment.
But very few executives understand. I mean, you think about that's the next step, but very few executives understand that 2 years ago, what we ask of the digital marketers is literally 5% of what we ask of them today, of how much they need to know the size of budget that they're responsible for, the focus on them providing, positive returns on every dollar they're given. By the way, also proving that the attribution is there and it's accurate and it's not fudged, right?
Yep.
That and the digital marketer, their role has changed more over the past few years than anybody else's. I don't know who else even comes close.
Yeah. One of the things I would do if I were a brand trying to ask for more budget is, again, knowing that ROAS is a blunt instrument, I would focus my efforts on getting data that shows that offline attribution. Because if your ROAS that's giving you $4 return right now for every dollar you put in, all of a sudden you account for offline sales and that $4 goes to $6 or $8, you bring that back to the CFO and say, can I get more research budget? I mean,
the answer is yes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You might know that incremental ROAS is going to be a better read on it, but whatever it takes, because I do think that a little bit of investment now is going to pay big dividends over the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for your time today. So glad we've gotten connected over the past few months here. Look forward to a ton of additional conversations in the future. Again, everybody, Andrew Lipsman, if you want to reach out to him on LinkedIn, doing a ton of great research as a whole. We're going to have you back for sure. But with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aaron. This was fun.
See you, Andrew.